Hey guys, this is Moses Sirigar. It's March 16th, 2020. Gonna make a little video here about everything that's going on. There's a lot going on. It's in the afternoon here in Arizona, 12:42. See how the stock market's doing. So it's down currently 22, almost 2,300 points today, which is about, oh boy, 2,700. So that's bigger than the recent biggest drop that was the biggest since 1987. Now, this isn't the end of the day yet. We'll see if it rallies, right? But right now, the stock market is about 500 points, the Dow Jones, about 500 points away from where it was when Trump was inaugurated. So that would literally be absolutely flat on the Dow Jones. Who knows what will happen here? But obviously, guys, we're in some pretty serious times. And that's why I'm just going to sit here and I wanted to do something kind of interesting today. I've looked over a few things. I've got some charts here that are some key moments that we may or may not get to here today. But we've got the Iran missile attacks. I guess that was the ones in retaliation for the U.S.'s attack. The Soleimani Strike, the March 12th stock plummet. Today is looking even potentially worse. It's currently worse. Another stock market day down 1,000, or rather 2,000 on the Monday before the big drop on a Thursday. We've got also the USA chart here, Donald Trump's chart, the election. Charlottesville's in here as well, the Saturn Ingress and the vernal equinox. So these are some charts we might play with. I'm going to start, also be aware I have 3 kids here. At some point I may have to stop and wipe some butts. We do have some toilet paper, so no worries there. In case you see this in the future and you're wondering what I'm talking about, there's been the run on toilet paper because of the coronavirus, and I felt slightly guilty going the other day and buying about 20 rolls, but, gotta do what you gotta do. Yeah, not a hoarder, but, trying to keep the kids covered here. So, anyway, here's this moment. This is just a live clock of where the planets are now. This is in tropical astrology. You'll see that I use tropical and sidereal astrology about equally, but I tend to think in tropical first because it's kind of my first language. And we're in some really crazy times, aren't we? So what the heck's going on? And, where do we see this? I wrote about this a little bit the other day. The biggest thing is, this does show up, I think, better in tropical astrology. And some things show up better in sidereal astrology. That's just how it goes. But we have Jupiter in his fall. That's Capricorn. It's his most difficult sign. And it's the only sign that really is particularly difficult. For any planet, really, there's a sign of fall, and there's always one for each traditional planet or the sun and moon. There's one sign that is particularly difficult. Now, there are many things we can say about that, but the planet always struggles in that sign in some way. And so there's Jupiter. Now, last year he was in Sagittarius. That's his own sign. That's where we have lots of optimism, and we want to go travel and do all that. And that's where we were. It was basically the bubble. And then now we're getting to whatever the reality is. That's going to cause this. Obviously, we're in this middle of this fluctuation. The market looks like it's probably going to be fluctuating. That's not an astrological prediction. That's just common sense. It's just going to fluctuate for a while. People are going to be investors trying to make a lot of money, as the market swings wildly, probably for a while. And in the middle of all that, we have Jupiter, who is the planet of wealth and abundance. And basically, and right now, it's kind of a good time for this video, or at least we hope, because the moon has just entered Capricorn. So we have just entered the realm of the mountain goat here, along with K2, the south node, Mars, Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. All right, that's a lot, right? And it's been like this. Charts have looked like this for months now. You go back to the eclipse. There's the eclipse that I had called. One of the things that I wrote that people probably liked more than others. I got a good response on this one. You can go back on my Facebook and look at the write-up on the Holy SH eclipse, which was this beast right here. And look at all this Capricorn. Significant moments, right? You could just step back and look at this big picture and say, wow, that's quite a lineup. There's something going on, in history, indeed, right? It's all in this tropical Capricorn. Now, in sidereal astrology, it's an awful lot of that's been going on in Sagittarius. And that's another story. And, one friend of mine, Vishwan, is a Jyotish astrologer. He suggested that there's, in the Sagittarian interpretation of it, from the sidereal side, that there's this kind of split into dark and light. That makes a lot of sense because, Sag has a lot to do with, the truth and ideally integrity, right? Doing all the right things, being upright and being positive and And we've had, previously we had Saturn was there and K2 was there. And that's a big deal from the Vedic point of view, just having those two guys there. Because they're both more intense, right? They're more of the quote unquote malefics. And so, anyway, that's another story. But Capricorn here is a big deal. Going back to, of course, the present, right? Let's go back to the chart of this very moment here. So a number of things are going on, and the big one, just to finish that thought here, is Jupiter in his fall, right? Planet of wealth. On one side, he's got Saturn and Pluto, who are, malefics. I mean, they're tough planets generally. We tend to sort of fear them. We have this sort of sense of reverence for them because we know that they come around and teach us a lot of lessons. They show up when that happens, right? Astrology is a big giant mirror. That's all it is. And it's always showing you yourself. And, kind of everything else too, obviously. But there's Mars on the other side. And K2, now K2, is the Indian name of the south node of the moon. And K2 is more of a malefic, more of a cutter, a separator, a divider. It brings criticism, it brings rejection, it brings this intensity. So it has this very intense character. And so Jupiter's been flanked, right? This is also a Vedic concept. On either side, of the planet, like scissors, you have Saturn and Pluto on one side and Mars and K2 on the other. So certainly there was an easy interpretation of this, of Jupiter being in his fall, surrounded by malefics. Now, when I saw that coming up, here's me being a bit optimistic by nature. I saw this come in, and my thought is, well, and I think this is true in a way, that this is a moment. Well, I think it is. I think it is true. This is a moment with all this Capricorn energy, for people to set goals and go after them very seriously, because now you have to, right? I mean, the coronavirus thing, people are having to do things they didn't think they would have to do. They're having to find that inner resourcefulness and that ability to kind of stand up and be responsible and lead and take care of the people around you. And boy, I mean, we could go on and on about the Capricorn bit, but that's an opportunity. It really is right now. And a lot of people are freaking out, of course, but, don't freak out. Anytime there's a crisis, there's always people who come out ahead, right? Anytime the stock market crashes, there's always people who come out ahead. It's one of those moments, and so don't just get distracted, focus on what you have to do to take care of your business. And in fact, you might do the most brilliant thing you've ever done to take care of your business. I am in fact attempting to do that, or at least trying to do something positive in my business. I'm going to be teaching a master class, which I've never, labeled it as such, on holistic locational astrology, which is what I do. Predominantly in my work, I help people when they need to relocate and figure out where they might want to be. So I'm going to have that class coming up soon, and you can check out my website, my newsletter, my Facebook for that. And I'm probably going to be offering some kind of special on consultations as people are trying to figure out what's going on in their lives economically, and, all this too. Because even if we pull off the quarantines and we test people and we flatten the curve on the coronavirus, even if we pull that off here in the U.S., there's going to be economic disruptions, obviously, right? I mean, a lot of businesses are shutting down. It's going to be, we don't know. But anyway, I think it's an important time for people to use whatever tools they can. Astrology is one that can give you quite a lot of perspective. So what's going on right now? Now, we can look to the past as well. In fact, let's look at something real quick here. Let's go back to December 1st. This is kind of amazing, really. The first case of coronavirus, go back to China and Wuhan province, right? 12/1/2019, we have the first case. That was basically the day around the 1st and 2nd of December when Jupiter, and this is quite amazing, this part, when Jupiter ingressed, went into Capricorn in tropical Western astrology. So that was the start, literally, of Jupiter in Capricorn. So this is kind of amazing, and it shows, okay, well, this was the beginning of it all. So I told clients when they were asking me last year about money, I said, I'm not an economic, stock market advisor. I don't really do a whole lot of that. But that was kind of obvious enough to me that Jupiter and Sag was the bubble in 2019. And I told people that as soon as December, there might be some kind of correction, there might be some kind of pullback, whatever. Because, Jupiter and Capricorn's bringing a lot of the reality of what's going on and the excess and so on. And that process is, it's just started. So So that was what was going on there. And of course, we already had a bazillion, bodies in tropical Capricorn at that time. And that's all sidereal Sag too, if you do Vedic. So that was the start. That was fun. And so really absolutely remarkable timing on Jupiter entering Capricorn at that point, because now, in fact, it's the coronavirus that's causing even more of the problems, obviously, which are now becoming, quite economic. So what else was going on? We had the, let's look at this here, January 10th, 2020. That was what I called the holy-ish eclipse. And, this was, oh, actually, wait a minute. I had it, and, yep, oh, sorry, this is right. 20 degrees at the sun, 20 degrees at the moon. All right, well, Jupiter in Capricorn, what was he doing that day? Because the eclipse is, is kind of a seed moment. It blasts us with a certain new energy, let's say. It's all very much a mirror, but it's as if it is doing that. So Jupiter's with the south node, and that's K2. So remember I was saying earlier, K2 cuts things, he restricts them, he denies them, he ends them, he transforms them. Well, yeah, and there's the Jupiter. There's the part of us that is now getting kind of creamed, this sense of hope and optimism and abundance. And we're having to find that, right? That's what happens with Jupiter and Capricorn. You have to find that. You got to dig deeper for some of that optimism. Anyway, K2 here is showing problems. I mean, K2 tends to show there's going to be transformations. It's quite a spiritual process, which means it is not a material process. It's going to put you through a spiritual ringer, a corridor that gets narrower and narrower, and you come out the other end somehow. Lots of crazy stuff really in this chart. Mercury is really, really close to the sun. We would say it's Cazimi. It's in the heart of the sun. And that's kind of good. There's a good thing about Cazimi. It's kind of like the eye of the hurricane. But it is still the heart of the sun, and so there is still this potential for things to be quite pronounced, while Mercury is a planet that brings, when at his worst, chaos. He can act like a trickster, and we honor, we have to honor all these energies, because this is life, this is everything. So you can't complain too much about these things either, Mercury retrograde teaches us a lot of lessons. Well, in fact, the stock market drop, let's look at that right here. Not the Thursday one, but the Monday one. There we go. March 9th, 2020. This was the day Mercury went direct. You can see right here at 5 p.m. it was retrograde, just barely, but stationing, so just about to turn direct. And we'll just animate this chart. I think by the end of the day or something like that, it went direct. Let's see here. There we go. So somewhere around by midnight, Mercury is direct. Yeah. So that was the day that Mercury turned direct, but that was a day of chaos. And a lot of times when we do have these particularly chaotic days, we, like I know in American history I've been looking at, of course, Mercury's often either at a point where it's going stationary, or at one of its shadow points, which is where it sort of crosses over the points at which it goes stationary. And you almost always see Mercury in those positions. I've seen it in the U.S. certainly, and it seems like a pretty high correlation on that one, really. So that happened, on Monday with the stock market, and it's also in the middle of all the chaos, right? Everything. I mean, why did the market drop 2,000 points? Why did it have its worst drop since 1987? Well, it's not just because the markets did something funky. There's a lot of stuff going on, right? Yeah, so going back to that eclipse, so why is this whole thing happening? Well, the holy SH eclipse here. So, the sun at that point was right with that trickster Mercury. Ceres was in there too. That's going to get into some interesting themes if there are shortages, right? Around, the things we normally have in abundance, let's say in the U.S., like toilet paper or dog food. I actually need dog food right now. Thank you very much. Costco shoppers, hey, I get it. Anyway, that's where we are, but we'll leave Ceres out for now. Saturn's there too, just 2.5 degrees from the sun, so it's very close conjunction with Saturn, who is the ultimate bringer of our lessons and karma, which is results of our own actions. It's reaping what we've sown. And Pluto just hanging out there too. So this was, of course, a monumental sort of conjunction with Saturn and Pluto. You heard a lot about that probably if you follow astrologers, and you still should, because it's still going on, newsflash, right? And Pluto was right there with the sun as well. So this eclipse, first of all, just had all of that. Jupiter was absolutely sort of, in this intense spiritual rebirth thing. And this is all an indication of energies that are going to last for at least 6 months. And in many ways, a big one like this, can linger another 6 months and be triggered even into the future. But even if we look short term, I like to look, specifically at narrower bands of time often. And looking at that, there's a lot baked in this cake and a lot to come here. So then, again, why is the coronavirus happening? Well, Saturn and Pluto are in a conjunction here in January, around the time it was spreading, right? Because it barely began in December. Like the first person was December 1st, but it was really more like December 12th and, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it took a minute to spread. So Saturn and Pluto, obviously, the lords of death. I mean, let's face it. In Capricorn, a sign of the elderly, the sign of, the winter that we have to survive in a sort of Darwinian fashion. And that's a big deal. Like that alone was a massive deal. That was a conjunction that you're only going to see. The length of time on the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions is, it varies essentially because of Pluto's orbit, but around 83, 84 we had it. Then we go back to the period after World War II, around the Korean War, for example, and get involved in that. I think it was like 47. So we have these certain periods that are these intense resets in a lot of ways, and that's another story, right? But the Saturn-Pluto conjunction here met up with this eclipse, and this eclipse was remarkable, and everybody was having an interesting time in January. I noticed that was the first time when a lot of people noticed there's more of a sense of tightening economically for people at that time generally. And so that was, perhaps a harbinger of some things, unfortunately. Anyway, that was the eclipse. So what else happened around that time? So we got here January 10th. Now there was another eclipse before that. That one was actually Christmas Day in some places. But what do we do here? January 2nd, between the two eclipses, at the time when, the impeachment was very much in the news, and we had arguably a distraction here. The strike that killed Soleimani in Baghdad. This is actually the chart for that. I did try to get it as exact as I could. So if I'm not mistaken, this is the moment that actually happened. So this strike happened on that day. What was going on there? We had Jupiter and Mercury and the South Node all within about 1 degree. So just like the eclipse, but now Mercury was in there too. And when Mercury goes bad, he goes trickster. And that's chaos. That is stuff that is intense. And so this strike was one of these moments. And it shows, because K2, man, it creates intensity around what it's contacting. And here it's contacting a Mercury-Jupiter conjunction, which is a very interesting conjunction around, for example, ethics. It's a complicated combination for ethics. So what was the ethics? And this is what came up. Like, was it right for us to strike this guy and kill him? Is it an assassination? Is that not an assassination? Is it, there was semantics and like different things were coming up, right? So we were looking at the language, the ethics, and it showed that, this was an ethical issue that would have a karmic sort of repercussion, like a very massive repercussion, not something you could do lightly. That's how I would read that. We had Mars at the last degree of Scorpio. We could kind of riff on that. The moon in Aries, getting to the first quarter. In fact, that moon position was in a direct square to Jupiter, Mercury, and the South Node. So quite a T-square at that moment, quite a profoundly tight configuration. Now, why am I talking about this? Let me toss in the other date here too real quick. So the Iran attack, where they bombed one of our bases in Iraq, which the number of people who are suffering traumatic brain injuries from that just keeps going up. Every time I check, it just goes up and up. Initially, it was like 12 people, everybody's fine. That's what the administration said, but in fact, the numbers just keep going up. So let's see what that is. Let's see how the market's doing. Yeah, this is live, folks. it's live in my little office here. Oh, we're down 3,000 points now. Oh dear God. So yeah, we're about 400 points away from wiping out literally all of the gains of the Donald Trump presidency so far, since he was inaugurated, in other words. Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's fun. Man. All right, let's look again at right now, because this is happening right now. I got to see this again. So right now, the moon, to belabor our points about K2, the south node here, the moon is about 2 degrees of Capricorn, and it's moving toward the south node about 4 degrees of Capricorn. So it's going to take it about 4 hours to get there, which is going to be around 5 p.m. here in Arizona. It'll be after the stock market is closed. Yeah, so this is intense this week, and I was going to talk about this obviously because Mercury just went back into Pisces, so that was part of the very short-term forecast here for today, and I'm actually just going to switch over to that because this is significant. So Mercury just went back into Pisces. It retrograded through Pisces back into Aquarius for a little bit. We're all talking tropical right now, back into Pisces, and now the energy now is concerning. Because this is Mercury's most difficult sign. So remember I was saying about Jupiter, that Capricorn is his most difficult sign. And he spends about a year in a sign. And then he'll spend about a year in the Western, and then about a year in the Vedic, and they overlap a little, but mostly they're kind of back to back. So this is the case for Mercury. Now Mercury moves pretty fast, so he doesn't spend, like Jupiter, he's not going to spend a year in Pisces. But this time around, he's spending an extra amount of time in Pisces. Why? Because he went retrograde back through the entire sign, got a little extra Aquarius as well, and now he's moving forward. Mercury symbolizes, among other things, the news. So you often see bad news when Mercury's doing something intense, finding out something, like literally the messenger being, telling you the latest. But it's also, how we're thinking and how we're communicating, and this is every planet has a weak position, a sign where it doesn't really know how to function there very well, and it has to learn how to function in that sign. And there are advantages, but we're not going to go into those right now. Mostly, this is concerning on the level that our minds, our communication, right, everything that's supposed to be really rational right now, isn't. And there's going to be a lot of emotion and a lot of the shadow sides of Pisces. And so, for example, you'll see victimization type stuff. In other words, blaming someone else. Like, no, you did it. I'm innocent. I'm a victim. You'll see this with certain political figures. But when we think of a pandemic, right, what sign would you connect a pandemic with? I mean, Pisces would probably be the first one. It's the 12th sign, which has some correlations with the 12th house, and that's a house of, hospitals and all that sort of the places of confinement traditionally. And of course, there's just the sense of, health, the panic potential in this case, unfortunately. So a lot of this is very Piscean. Capricorn adds the sense of like, oh yeah, and people are going to die, and old people are going to die, and the market is not doing well, and this is real life. This is going to get serious. I do think, by the way, that there's room for optimism. I think there's plenty of things in the stars, that we're looking at here today, that show that things are going to be stable enough. So I'm not certainly encouraging any kind of panic, and yet Mercury's just gone back into Pisces, which means there's going to be some of that. There's going to be you're going to see a lot of people saying and doing a lot of stupid things, unfortunately. And I'm interpreting this very globally, very much not personally here. But yeah, that's going on. And what else is going on here recently? Saturn is in the very final degree of Capricorn. So everything is very Saturn, and everything is very Capricorn. It's intense. The end of Capricorn, if we go to the Egyptian bounds or terms, right? The end of Capricorn is ruled by Mars. And the exaltation degree, the maximum place of exaltation for Mars is 28 Capricorn. So the end of Capricorn is very, very, very Marsy. It's very much like Mars. And so we have the combination of Saturn and Capricorn, potentially heavy, although strong. He's in his own sign, which shows why, for example, some governments are taking strong measures. South Korea did the best job, I think, from what we've seen, testing lots of people, really flattening their curve to contain what could have been a lot worse. But of course, this spreads. It spreads about twice as easily as the flu was the last thing I read from a reputable source. So here's that Saturn, and he's hanging out with Mars and Jupiter and Pluto. They're all together in the sky. Pluto's intense, god of death. Mars is intense, god of war. And we have Jupiter, who is trying to help, and he is going to help, but he's still kind of getting beat up right now around these very strong energies, really. Saturn, I believe Saturn, of course, rules Capricorn traditionally, that Mars, of course, is exalted traditionally in Capricorn. Definitely agree with that. I actually think Pluto is probably exalted in Capricorn if it has an exaltation sign. And that's why, for example, we saw the Great Depression, literally, the era with Saturn and Cancer in that generation, dealing with that, Whereas in Capricorn, I think Pluto is actually quite powerful, just like Mars is. It certainly has some affinity for that sign. So in a way, we have the problem here of malefics who are too strong, to the point where, disruption and death and all that mayhem. And Jupiter's in the middle trying to help out, but he's not in a great mood at the moment. So, and this is why, again, individually, what you have to do is find that inner mountain goat who climbs and climbs and climbs and says, okay, this is going to get messy in some places, but I'm going to climb to higher ground, or I'm going to do what I got to do. That's what it's about for you, and for everyone, it's this survival moment, and it's a survival moment, and it's how do we deal with really serious stuff. Now, collectively, we just don't deal with stuff, right? We just go, I'm just trying to pay my bills, or I'm getting late, or I'm playing a game, or, we have lots of ways that we avoid things. And so this is one of those moments. Saturn forces you to deal with things. That's what he does. So he's at the very end of Capricorn in the position of you must deal with everything. And it's not light. And so there is an opportunity here, right, for growth. I mean, people are learning things like I wipe my phone down more often than I used to, right? Like I clean surfaces better than I used to. We're all getting smarter on certain levels like that, but again, it's bigger too. So back to what's going on right now. Mercury's just gone into Pisces, so everybody's kind of losing. People are going to be losing their minds, and it's not really great to see this right now, unfortunately. Yeah. Saturn, meanwhile, at the very end of Capricorn, is also punctuating all this business. Now, Mars is interesting in Capricorn, right? On the one hand, he is exalted. He is in his, very arguably, his best sign. Certainly some of his most dramatic results will come from that sign. So on the one hand, we have this strength from Mars. And strong Mars is not always a good thing, right? Exaltation tends to be a more pleasant thing in general, but this is a different situation too. It does. What I mean here is that there is a potential for some professionalism, right? For some, hey, let's rise above. Let's be noble here. Let's be dignified. And obviously that's what we want to focus on. There's also this potential that this is, an excess of Mars. Heat, aggression, selfishness, and it, can be a lot of different things. So Mars comes along in a way as this wrecking ball. He's going to destroy. He's going to just punch and kick in random directions, and somebody's going to get hurt because he's pissed and he's whatever, Now, Mars does become smarter in Capricorn, right? He's more dignified. He's more of a knight in a way, right? But Jupiter is expanding on Mars, so Mars is a little overinflated right now, and Mars is coming into Pluto as well, which is the sense of, hey, there's a lot of power. There's this intensity to what's going on with Mars. It's expanding in different directions simultaneously. And part of it is that now Mars is going to run into Jupiter, and then Pluto, and then eventually Saturn, and so on. And especially these three guys, there is each of those moments is going to be painful, in some respect. Hopefully what we offset it with is the sense of, yes, and we're going to rise to this occasion. And yes, if we got to quarantine, we'll quarantine. Or, if we got to do whatever, we're going to do whatever. And each individual's got to find that strength and courage, right? And no great hero or heroine, right, is going to kind of, meet their destiny unless there's a challenge, unless there's a moment where we have to rise to that. I think when I said that, it was actually 1:11:11 here in Arizona. I just was looking at that on the real-time clock here. Anyway, kind of cool. So Mars is going to run into Jupiter and then Pluto and then Saturn. Saturn, meanwhile, is about to change signs. This is another very significant event. Let's look at this here. Well, I have the Saturn Ingress. Let's go ahead and just look at that. Best as I could get it was about literally a minute before midnight, March 21, 2020. That's using my software here. And that puts Saturn right at 0 Aquarius, certainly right around that moment. Okay, so that's quite significant, isn't it? Because now we have Saturn, who's been a part of this kind of wrecking crew for a little bit, going into Aquarius, and this is a big change. There's going to be some big changes. Now, we'll see this, let's say, in the U.S. on the 22nd. The 22nd, Saturn will be in Aquarius. But up until then, it's very, very Capricorn. It's at the end of Capricorn. And so all of the kind of, the heavy, earthy, solid, is coming together there. What's going to happen here? Well, I mean, let's think positively for a moment here. Saturn and Aquarius is basically the combination you want, certainly one of them, if you need people to work together. And there will be places where people work together very well, or at least relatively well. And there is this sense now of, okay, maybe we do need, God forbid, maybe we do need the government for some things. Maybe it's good to have a strong response, or whatever you want to say about it. And communities can be smart and work together. And so this is a potential change in how we are operating, the government is operating, communities are operating. And there is a shift, in a sense, from Capricorn to Aquarius of, I'm going to be the noble individual who carries all this crap on his back and climbs up this mountain and somehow gets there, to Aquarius, which is a lot more, hey, let's do this together. Let's do it in a business or a community or an organization or a group of friends, or there's more of a sense of working together. So there's that potential, and I think hopefully that comes in on that day. Now, this is a serious moment. Anytime Saturn is changing signs, there's a lot of Saturn in the air. So, we may see some intense stuff too, but there's also a risk at that point of factionalism. Let's talk about that for a moment. So Aquarians, if you look at a lot of Aquarians, you'll hear eventually certain ways that they will kind of factionalize in their minds, which is ironic because Aquarius is arguably the most inclusive sign. Like a typical Aquarius will want to be like friends with everybody, or like, maybe growing up they're friends with the jocks and the geeks and whatever, they have that friendliness about them. Okay. But there can be this factionalism too. Like you very often see it male versus female. You'll see some of that thinking of like really dividing the male and female more than most people do in their minds. And it's not just male, female. I mean, it can be, Aquarius can represent rebellion. So it can be, the young upstarts against the establishment. Okay. Well, that's happening on the left politically right now. That's happening overall politically right now. So we have to watch out for various kinds of factionalism, young versus old, all of that. So we have to, watch ourselves, because if we're not careful, we're going to get more divided into more camps. And, that's dangerous. That is potentially dangerous. But there is a potential to come together, work together here in Aquarius. And, if this is significant, and, it is an ingress, so this is a significant moment from the astrological point of view. We do see, the moon is just separating from this Mercury and Pisces, Mercury in its fall, so difficult Mercury stuff. And hang on a minute, I'm going to check on my kids. Okay, all is well. He's looking for his crystal that he got yesterday at the gem show, and he's misplaced it, so he was upset about that. But anyway, where were we? So Mercury Moon, this kind of shows in a way, the people, the moon, the mood of the people, let's say, and it's with this, Mercury not really in a good spot. Now Mercury is in a trine to the North Node, and this is something that's coming up. We can look at this even on a short-term basis, what that might mean. But this is not necessarily a good thing. Mercury and the North Node, or Rahu in India, they can both be connected with things like poisons, like Mercury and Rahu. And you see that combination a lot with things like that. So I'm wondering, that's kind of negative end of the polarity. Positive end of this polarity is, some kind of science comes in and helps us out here. And maybe there's going to be some good breakthroughs there too. That's literally just coming up in a few days. This is March 21st, Saturday, actually, so not too long. All right, so anyway, the mood here is still kind of strange. And in fact, the connection between Mercury and Rahu kind of, exacerbates that, because people get compulsive, right? They'll overbuy, like recently. And we'll see what happens. But your thinking can get a bit strange, compulsive, paranoid, fearful. Rahu can do some strange stuff, and people's minds can be more influenced by drugs and alcohol under that kind of influence. This is all the mood. Like the moon and Mercury are the mind of the people, right? And well, in this case, I'm interpreting it as the mind of the people, and it's a bit weird with this one. So at the same time, Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn are in this amazing conjunction. I mean, they're just within a couple degrees of each other. That doesn't happen every day, guys, and it happens right when Saturn makes his first ingress here into Aquarius. So it does punctuate this intensely. The hope here is that the Saturn in Aquarius shows smart governments and smart communities and smart people and scientists and all that, doing the right thing and working together in a smart way. And there is that. That's what gives me hope here. Venus is even still in the middle of Taurus, which means that, hopefully there's, some stability financially here. Uranus is interesting in Taurus. That's kind of another subject. And I have suspected for a while that Uranus has his fall in Taurus and exaltation in Scorpio. And I think that, the first day Uranus went into Taurus, the Big Island volcano erupted. So that was kind of an example of, hey, this is maybe not the easiest placement here. But that's another subject too. So this is the Saturn Ingress. There's going to be a shift collectively with that. And I think this is going to be very interesting for you individually as well. Saturn moving into Aquarius will definitely change a lot of things in your life. And everyone is, of course, a little different from that. That's why we do astrology and we do readings for individuals. But I think that there is a movement, hopefully, from the 2020, this intensity in Capricorn and Mars getting involved in all of it. And frankly, people are dying and economies are being disrupted, and it's a weird time. So there is that. There is this, and it's causing us to face a lot of truths, and deal with things, right? We're normally just not dealing with the things. We're just hoping that we can survive long enough for other people, just keep, passing that down the line to the next generation, get out of here before, you have to deal with all the consequences, and just kind of, skim through life like that. Well, this is the kind of year where the universe says, okay, no, you got to deal with these realities here. And, this is part of the process of growth, right? This is how we get to fat and we get to, the bubble expands and expands like it did up through Jupiter and Sag through 2019. And here we are with a different process going on. So concerning for the mood of the people here, I think, during the Saturn ingress, and yet Saturn is still trying to make things solid. Now, if the government has a solid response, okay, that would be really encouraging. So if you live in a place where governments do responsible things, good for you. Yeah, good for you. Yeah, let's look at something else here. The Soleimani Strike, we were looking at that, and I do want to finish my thought from that one, actually. That was the thing. I was going to look for the number of deaths, number of traumatic brain injuries. Iran strike. 109. Okay, so that was the latest there. So they did eventually stop. 109 troops suffered from traumatic brain injuries as a result of the Iran missile strike. That's a big deal if you're one of those people, and that if that soldier is someone or love or part of your family, that's a lot of suffering, for a lot of people for a long time. So this is serious stuff. But why are we talking about it? Because it happened at the same time as the eclipse. What else happened around the eclipse? Coronavirus. So this eclipse is significant because the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, that lasts a long time. And it's setting the tone for a new Saturn-Pluto cycle, a new synodic cycle, which is, 30-something years or whatever. It's a long time. That's happening in Iran. This thing with Iran happened at that time, which is, we directly took out their number 2. They bombed, and now we have 109 soldiers with traumatic brain injuries, right? Unfortunately, this is a bit ominous for the future with Iran, because Iran is also, and the U.S. and Iran are also connected here through that eclipse, which was heavy as hell, right? The Saturn-Pluto piece and all that. So unfortunately, there's a bit of a to be continued with that one. And, yeah, So that's unfortunately connected with some stuff that could be a really big deal. Now, interesting at the time that happened, go back for a moment and think about the eclipse, because we're going to be thinking a lot about eclipses. And when we look at the election too, we're going to think a lot about that, because Donald Trump, I'll give you a quick little peek on this fella here. Donald Trump and the election, November 3rd. Oh, look at that. Perfect nodal return for Donald Trump. North node, tropical. 20 Gemini, along with the moon transiting 20 Gemini at 10 p.m. that night. His north node is 20 Gemini. That's the midpoint of his sun, which is 23, and Uranus, which is about 18. So it's right there. South node then is also with his moon and his south node. That's just one thing, but you're going to hear me saying more about this in the future. And that's a heck of a moment. More on that later. But this is part of the story for the year, obviously. And we have a chart here for the USA we can look at as well. It's July 4th, 76, 5:10 p.m., Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Astrologers love to disagree about the chart for the US. This one actually works really well, so I use it. And we have things that are going on right now. So, for example, I don't think I've even looked at the just straight transits right here recently, but my buddy Timmy was telling me about what's going on right here. Okay, so here's Chiron right now. Right now, one of the things we have in the sky, Chiron at about 4-5 degrees Aries in a square to both of the nodes of the moon, about 4 or 5 degrees of Cap and Cancer. For the U.S., that is the Venus-Jupiter placement. This is incredibly interesting, actually, looking at it. Because this Jupiter-Venus, this is kind of the wealth, the luck of America. The homes are always a good investment, and the stock market, and obviously it's been a very prosperous place overall. And that's this Venus-Jupiter conjunction with an exalted Jupiter. It's in the 8th sign from the ascendant. That gets into some financial houses. Anyway, the North Node is there. And this would be a good study to look at what's happened every time the North Node comes around to this point. Because, the Vedic idea is Rahu is a wild man. He's going to cause problems. It's going to get chaotic. This one is punctuated by the way that Chiron here is in a square to this. Now, a lot of astrologers don't look at Chiron, fair enough. When he does show up, especially with these hard aspects, it often is, something a bit gnarly. And, that's pretty fitting. And I do want to look at the months to come. We're going to look forward as well and show you some of the key moments of the cycles coming up. And there's some interesting stuff coming up. Quote unquote interesting. Sarcasm quotes. Let's see. Well, there's another Chiron piece. So the U.S. Chiron. This is what my friend Timmy Conley was telling me. So Chiron here is 20 Aries, and the transit is Mars at 20 Cap. Of course, Jupiter and Pluto. So we just had, a square to the U.S. Chiron as well. So here's the double whammies. That's one way to kind of see this. So kind of neat, for those of you who do not use Chiron. Here it is. It is there. You can't really say it isn't there. It's definitely showing up at this moment in a rather significant way. And in fact, today, as the market is having maybe its worst day in a really long time, even more than, I forget how much it dropped in 87, but I know, yikes. Anyway, Mars is in a square to the U.S. Chiron today. That's today. And in Vedic astrology, Mars would actually make this square just like it would in Western astrology. So it's clearly a square. Mars is exalted. That means it's very powerful. So that's part of what's going on. All right, so let's look forward a little bit more. Let's see. Last thoughts on the Saturn Ingress here. You're going to see a preview of coming attractions in your own life. So March 22, key date here, March 22. Saturn goes into Aquarius, and this is part of defining for you, maybe not even just the next 2.5 years or so that Saturn tends to stay in a sign, but also 20 years, because at the end of 2020, after the U.S. election, right at the winter solstice, there's going to be a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, the first degree of Aquarius in the tropical zodiac. And that is a historical reset that changes the planet and the way that the most influential leaders in the world are operating. And there is actually optimism for that as well. It is quite possible that we get some responsible stuff coming out of government in some places. And with all that Aquarian energy, it's possible that, people really come together and communities work together, and we have a revolution in terms of how we think about, how we take care of each other, how we live, really, right? I mean, how we try to survive at this point, geez. Yeah. So that's going to be an interesting preview for you. Now, that's from about March 22nd of this year until about July 1st. So it's just about 3 months and a week. You'll get a preview of Saturn in Aquarius in your own life. And, for different signs, it's going to affect you differently. It's going to be, it happens differently for everybody. So we can say things we have to when we write these generic pieces, what is happening kind of globally or generally. But that'll be a neat time for you to watch and pay attention to what's changing in your life. Anyway, let's move forward here. So we'll go back to the moment, and we'll check the old stock market one more time. Cross your fingers, everybody. We're still down 3,000-ish. Okay, no change from the last check here. Yikes. Oh boy. So yeah, here we are today. The moon's moving into K2. So this starts this lovely, 2.5 day type period here, where the moon will go through a sign. Now it's through Capricorn. So the moon's about to go and highlight each of these things. And the moon is kind of our minds and emotions. So everybody's going to be going crazy and panicking for a few days. Or whatever. It's going to be intense. There's going to be some psychological intensity to this for sure. And the moon's about to square Chiron right now, in fact, and conjoin the South Node. And Saturn's at that final degree. And Mercury, notice what I was saying about, the planet in the final degree or the beginning degree. Mercury is at the beginning of Pisces right now. So everybody's panicking on the stock market right now. Not necessarily rationally, et cetera, et cetera. It's a chaotic moment. It's a tough Mercury moment, just like it's a very, very Saturn moment. And the moon is about to make us feel all this stuff in here in Capricorn, Let's move this forward a little bit and see what happens in the coming, weeks and months. Let's just go forward a week. Okay, now we got March 23rd. This is right after that Saturn Ingress, the vernal equinox. Okay, let's go forward another week. Now at that point, by then, Mars has gone himself into Aquarius. Exactly 2 weeks from, what is this, March 30, 1:30 p.m. in Arizona. That's Pacific time right now. So yeah, Mars goes into Aquarius there. And that's going to be pretty significant as well. So of course, before that, let's go back 2 weeks. Mars is about to come to Jupiter and then Pluto. So when is that? And this will be a fun one. So Mars is just reaching Jupiter on March 19th. That's Thursday. On the 20th, Friday, he's between Jupiter and Pluto. So now Mars is the midpoint. Exalted Mars is the midpoint of Pluto and Jupiter. Now again, this may have an effect. I mean, it's going to have an effect, apparently, globally. This is one of the ones. Sometimes we see these things and it's like it seems to affect everybody personally. And sometimes you see these things and it seems to be like really global or, international news. Well, this one's very international, but it's also having an effect on us personally. And that's a testament to the seriousness, right, of all this stuff in Capricorn going on. Yeah, so it's going to be intense right here. It's going to be a very intense week. But you also have to find out, again, how to seize the ring for yourself in some way, how to, I mean, sometimes we got to be, what's the right term here, for this strong Martian Saturnian approach. I think you get the right idea. We've got to each make sure that, things are taken care of. We're being forced into it, obviously. So here's a very intense moment. So we expect, significant events around this. We could offer all sorts of possibilities here. But, I hate to offer, a few likely possibilities, and it's the fourth thing, and then, who cares? Like we can see what's happening here, especially as we get closer to it, we react to what's happening. You understand that this is still an intense moment. Now, there's volatility in this, so the market may have, its greatest recovery ever too, or something as well. I mean, I don't know, and I'm not a stock market guy. I can't really give you a very intelligent opinion on that. But we then see Saturn come to Mars, and Mars come to Saturn. Mars will apply to Saturn and conjoin Saturn. So that's going to be around March 31st, Tuesday. Now, there is this Aquarian movement at that point, so there's a sea change in what's happening at that moment. Like we said, March 22nd, there's a sea change with Saturn going into Aquarius. March 31st, and I guess I should say March 30th and 31st, Mars in Aquarius. Another Aquarian sea change. So how do we become more global, more community-oriented? Now, these are intense planets, Mars and Saturn, but what's good about them? They can work really hard. They can be really grounded. They can really deal with reality. We may see governments and scientists and everyone else being more community-minded because, Aquarius does try to think about everybody. At least it has that aspiration, right? So ideally, we're getting strong here. We're taking care of everybody. We're reaching out. Now, obviously, this is ironic at a time when everyone's quarantining and we're talking about community. But, we got to figure out how to do this in the situation that we're in. This is, certainly potentially a disruptive, transit as well. There'll be there'll be a lot of stories that come out around this one. And you do have to wonder at this moment what the rebellion looks like, right? Like what the opposition looks like as, this is a rebellious sign, Aquarius. And especially when we add Mars to it. And Mars is still not that far from his exaltation degree, so he's still coming off that high, He's riding high on his own power, his own courage, his own, discipline. And that's born out of all of this crap that's happening as well. But here's where it's possible that sort of oppositional energy, that resistance energy, and this could manifest all sorts of ways around the world, obviously. Different kind of reactionary, reactions to strong government, right? Saturn represents a strong government, Saturn in Aquarius. Maybe Mars in Aquarius comes along and there are some people who say, hey, we need to take this stuff from you, or we need to oppose you, right? There's going to be different stories about the rebels and, the opposition, and it's going to change how things are happening. Politically, it'll change. It'll be a sea change with this Saturnian bit, and things start subtle, just like you could see when Jupiter went into Capricorn. That was December 1st, right? With the very first day of the coronavirus. Well, that was the beginning. That's how it started, right? So this video is getting kind of long, so I'm going to have to cut it off in a minute, but we'll try to keep it under an hour. So this is very significant, and, what's the reality that's brought to making things better? Now, you want to be proactive, make things better. Organize something for the community that's smart, that doesn't involve people, I don't know, being within 6 feet of each other too much, That's part of it. I mean, it's not funny. I mean, people are going to die, and we each have a responsibility at this point to not spread something that is going to kill people, right? I mean, you'd hate to be the person that transmits to someone who transmits to a lot of people who, you get what I'm saying, right? We each have a responsibility to try to not kill people at this point. Lovely. Okay, so what else is happening here? So let's look at this a little bit further. Mercury-Neptune conjunction. How do you think people are going to be thinking at that point, and what's the news going to be like at that point, and what's the panic level going to be like at that point? This is about the time when, if you look at coronavirus cases, and I have some numbers here, right? So look at Iran, week 1, 2 cases, week 2, 43 cases, week 3, 245 cases, week 4, 4,747 cases, and week 5, 12,729 cases. The mortality rate is much higher than the flu. It spreads twice as easily as the flu unless you contain it. These places are having to contain it. So here we are, 2 cases, 105 cases, 600 cases, and you see what's next. In the U.S., there are, I think, only 50,000, what are they called? The thing that helps you breathe when you have coronavirus. Anyway, I forget the name of it, but there are about 50,000 of those in the U.S., So we don't want the numbers to get too high because eventually then people will just die because we literally want to have the equipment to save them. That's why it's all about flattening the curve, right? Trying to do the quarantining and wash your hands and wipe everything down and be careful because we want to slow this down so that we don't overwhelm the hospitals, and because that's going to get ugly, and it is ugly. In Italy they're having to basically choose to kill off people who are 80 or over because they can only save so many people. So this is awful stuff. Mercury and Neptune are coming together here, April 3rd. Looks more like a bad news day, looks more like a panic day, looks more like a people aren't rational day. That's a Friday. So careful on that one, if you can, do something fun that day. Try not to get caught up in the hysteria. Do something that's fun, of a more Pisces nature. If you know what that means, I'll leave it at that. maybe something creative or whatnot. Just there's a lot of things you might do with that. So there's always good ways to work with these things, and there's always other indications too. But this is a very, very tough position for Mercury because we're just not. He's so underwater at this point. Now, what can come out of that is a lot of compassion, and a lot of love and spiritual service and orientation of that mindset of a bigger heart, and that's going to be important right here. Jupiter and Pluto are moving into a conjunction right here. So yeah, it's cycle upon cycle upon cycle, right? Here's this, synodic cycle as Jupiter conjoins Pluto around April 4th or 5th. Another huge moment. Now, Jupiter and Pluto can be a really good financial combination. So again, some people are going to get rich off this. To try to, take care of yourself, obviously. But there is a financial opportunity here. And maybe one of the last really good ones for a while, depending on what happens with the economy. I mean, who knows? We'll have to see where it goes, right? All right, so we're still moving forward here. What else is going on? Well, eventually Mercury leaves Pisces, but that's not until April 11th, which feels like a long way away, right now here, sitting here on March 16th. At that point, it's still in Pisces in the sidereal zodiac, and that has its own sort of repercussions or significations or correlations. So there's still that kind of Mercury in Pisces. So you hear all the Vedic astrologers at that point saying, oh, Mercury's in Pisces. And yeah, so that's going to be a thing still. What else is going on here? Hang on a minute. I want to go forward. See, the thing with the coronavirus is it kind of explodes over 4 or 5 weeks. It kind of expands. So if it unfortunately it may go to other countries that don't have it so much. They're going to have their own thing and their own kind of. So there could be other massive spikes in coronavirus cases down the road as it transmits. We don't know a lot about it. We don't know what's going to happen in the summer. Will it die down? Maybe will it then come back in the fall if it does that? Just a whole lot we don't know apparently about it. So it's still very early. This is going to be an interesting one here. So there is a new moon there on April 22nd, conjunct Uranus. And that highlights that planet in Taurus that was, that I think can certainly be disruptive. We would always say that about Uranus, sudden unexpected events. But there's a big earthy piece of this. There's a big sense of what is this, an Earth? Is this a new moon that sort of times a period where there's a significant Earth event or a financial event? That's another big Taurus, consideration. So that could be part of that too. Even if we go a little further down the road, so we've got Mars going through Aquarius here, right? So there's this drive, this energy then to be smarter, to be more collectively minded, to hopefully work with the government to do things smartly. In some cases, it's the rebellion, it's the opposition, it's fighting back against structures, and powers that aren't benefiting the people. Let's say. I mean, that sounds pretty Aquarian, doesn't it? So Mars here has a really intense moment right at the very end of Aquarius, May 11th, May 12th, and then he goes into Pisces. Oh joy, May 13th. Into May 14th a little bit. So that's when he's changing signs. So that's a very Mars moment. So we'll see intense, Mars things at that moment. The Aquarian part of it, we'll see what that looks like. And we were just talking about the different possibilities. Now here it goes to Pisces. May 13th. This is the sign where, I'm connecting with a lot of just the general pandemic stuff. Here we go with Mars to Ceres. When does that actually come in? So I wonder if that's some disruptions to things like food and supplies and the basic stuff, and also could have some medical repercussions at that point. That's May 23rd. So that's kind of an intense little window right there, potentially. Now, meanwhile, Venus has gone retrograde. So let's back up. Venus goes retrograde around May 12th, 13th. Tropical Gemini. If you do Vedic astrology, that's going to be in Taurus. And, that station happens what? In a square to Neptune. Oh, boy. Because Neptune in Pisces is one of the strongest significators of this whole crazy pandemic thing and lots of other crazy things. In a bigger picture, Neptune in Pisces is connected with the way we're kind of getting off in our little fantasy lands and not necessarily dealing with reality. Well, here comes all the Capricorn that forces to deal with reality. But Venus in a square to Neptune. So this Venus cycle, this Venus retrograde, is going to have a lot of strong Neptunian, pieces to it. And it's going to, there's going to be some weird intensity, some very emotional, people are going to be really emotional with it, Retrograde Venus, it doesn't act like sweet Venus. It acts kind of like intense, Venus. And with Neptune squaring it, the emotions, right? The fears, the worries, and maybe the reality. Like Neptune can show up when we are humbled by health, right? Which we are. The world is being humbled by health issues right now. People are dying. People are sick. We're trying not to spread it. Yeah, so that's significant too. That more could be said about that. I'm running out of time. So we just went for an hour. So last thing we want to show here. We also get a point then at which Mars comes to Neptune. I am not looking forward to this guy. Yeah, so that's about June 12th or 13th. In fact, the moon gets together with Mars and Neptune just to punctuate that. Wow, okay. That's around the time of a third quarter moon. Okay. So that's some tough adjustments we have to make there. And Mars and Neptune together, on the one hand, this could be a bad moment for the pandemic. This may be the height of the deaths. Who knows? Like this may be pretty intense with that. And, so if we think positive, what do we do with this? It's about taking care of each other. And that's ultimately the wake-up call that we are getting here, right? Is that spiritually we have to wake up. So I'm going to end the video on that note and think about, the compassion that represents, because that will be very important around that time. And there's more we could say, but I've taken enough of your time today, so thank you. My website is astrologyforthesoul.com. You can find me on Facebook at Astrology the Cosmic Mirror with Moses Sirigar, and you can find me here and there online. So thanks for watching this video. If, obviously you're welcome to share it and all that good stuff if you find it useful, and I look forward to doing more. And if you guys want to see certain things or topics, let me know your feedback. And the more response we get, the more the royal we over here is likely to play around with some more fun videos. So thanks for sharing time with me, guys, today, and hope everybody's well, and may all beings be happy and free.